The afternoon of the 19th of May 1944. 200 miles north of Bougainville, the water is flat and bright and completely empty. Aboard a 306-foot American destroyer escort, a sonarman calls a solid contact off the starboard bow and Lieutenant one hand on the bridge rail and waits for the echo to come back a second time. His ship displaces 400 tons. She mounts 3 guns. In 5 months of commissioned life, she has never attacked anything at all. Over the next 12 days, she will sink 6 Japanese submarines, a record no navy on Earth has matched before or since, and the name painted across her stern belongs to a 20-year-old who drowned at Pearl Harbor. The ship is USS England, hull number DE-635, a Buckley-class destroyer escort welded together in San Francisco and commissioned on the 10th of December 1943. Regular viewers of this channel have met that class before. On the day a boarding party climbed onto USS Buckley's forecastle in the Atlantic. England carries 15 officers and 198 men. Apart from her captain, almost none of them intended to make the Navy a career. They are school teachers and machinists and college students who expect to go home. And there is a question underneath the 12 days that follow. One the US Navy could not answer until after the war ended. Why did the Imperial Japanese Navy keep sending submarines into that same water? At 1341, the England attacks. She does not drop depth charges, a forward-throwing projector that lofts 24 small contact-fused bombs into a ring ahead of the bow. Depth charges explode on a timer and blind the sonar. Hedgehog bombs only detonate if they strike steel, which means a miss is silent and contact is never lost. British wartime figures put it at roughly 1 submarine sunk for every 6 Hedgehog attacks, against 1 for every 60 depth charge attacks. The first salvo misses. The second scores a single hit at 130 feet. The third is set for 200 feet. The fathometer, read afterward, says the target was at 325. The submarine is I-16 and her captain is very good. Takekuchi Yoshitaka turns onto the England's own course and runs inside her wake, where the churned water blinds the sonar. He outmaneuvers the 4th attack for the 5th. At 14:33, Pendleton comes in for the 5th. The salvo goes out, the ring of bombs enters the water, and 4 to 6 of them find the hull. What follows is not the sharp crack of a contact bomb. It is a single enormous underwater explosion that lifts the England's fantail clear and knocks men off their feet across the after deckhouse. Then the sea goes quiet. I-16 had sailed from truck on the 14 May carrying rice, not torpedoes. 75-pound rubber bags of it, bound for the Japanese garrison at Bouin, on the southern tip of Bougainville, a garrison that had been bypassed and cut off and left to starve. She never arrived, and the men at Bouin went on waiting. Aboard England, the crew is cheering on the fantail. They believe they have had a remarkable piece of luck. They have no idea that I-16 was not alone out there, that she was one boat in a line, or that the line is exactly where they are going next. To understand why 6 submarines were available to be sunk in 12 days, we have to back up to the spring of 1944 and look at a decision made by a Japanese admiral who was guessing. It began as a reasonable plan drawn on a chart. It became the reason 6 crews did not come home. And it is the single clearest illustration in the Pacific War of what happens when one side is reading the other side's mail. In the spring of 1944, Admiral Toyoda Somu had assembled a fleet at Tawi-Tawi and did not know where the Americans would strike next. The choices were the Marianas or the Palaus, and getting it wrong meant sending the fleet 1,000 miles in the wrong direction. So Toyoda did what a careful commander does. He built a tripwire, a submarine scouting line running from Truk in the Carolines toward a point just west of Manus in the Admiralties, each boat holding a fixed station at a set interval, positioned so that an American invasion force could not cross without being seen. The boats assigned were I-16, RO-104, RO-10108, RO-16 and RO-117. On paper it was sound. It is what any navy would have done. Its fatal flaw was not tactical. It was that the stations were assigned by radio. On the 13th of May 1944, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific intercepted and decoded a message from 16. It concerned Rice and a delivery schedule and Buin. It was not a war plan. It was logistics, the most boring traffic a submarine sends, and it told the United States Navy precisely where one Japanese boat would be and roughly when. 3 destroyers were ordered to intercept: England, USS George, hull number DE-697, and USS Raby, DE-698. They were not the fleet's finest ships. They were what was available, and because Toyoda's line was a line, finding one station meant you could work out where the next one had to be. This is worth being precise about, because the popular version of this story gets it backward. England did not stumble onto 6 submarines. She was walked up a chalk line somebody else had already drawn on a chart in Hawaii. What the crew supplied was the part intelligence cannot supply. Sonar discipline at 4 in the morning after 3 days without sleep, and a fire control team that could hold a contact through a miss without losing it. Code-breaking put them in the right square of ocean. It did not put the bombs on the hull. Both of those things are true, and the story only works if you say both. Subscribe now before the next chapter, because what is coming is the strangest part of this story. The moment the Japanese Sixth Fleet worked out that something was killing its submarines, and watched it make still afloat, and watched it make no difference at all. Do not go anywhere. Because at first light on the 20th of May, 3 days after I-16, the USS George picks up a radar contact at 3:50 in the dark north of the Admiralties. The second boat on Toyoda's line has just surfaced to charge her batteries. 0350 hours, 20 May 944. George holds 1-6 on radar and attacks first. She misses. England comes in behind her, fires her first hedge salvo and misses too. General quarters has been set for most of the night, and the men on the projector deck are reloading in the dark by feel. At 0501, England fires a second salvo. The bombs enter the water in a ring, and the ring closes on steel. The detonations run together into one sound, and then a heavier one underneath it. Oil comes up. It is not yet dawn on the 3rd day, and the count stands at 2. 20 through May. The third boat is RO-104. And this one does not want to die. Raby and George work her for over 2 hours and put in 8 hedgehog attacks between them without a hit. 8. Then England takes over. Her first attack misses. Her second at 0834 produces an estimated 10 to 12 detonations, and 3 minutes later by an explosion large enough to be felt through the deck plates. Debris and oil reach the surface at 10:45. 3 submarines in 5 days by the same small ship. It is worth stopping on what that actually required, because it was not luck and it was not the weapon by itself. A hedgehog attack is a mathematics problem solved at 15 knots. The projector throws a fixed distance ahead of the bow, so the ship must arrive at a computed point, at a computed speed on a computed bearing, and the sonar going from the last few hundred yards of the run, as the beam passes of the tart, as the beam passes under the target. George and Raby had the identical equipment. England's team simply kept solving it, attack after attack in the dark, hungry for 12 days. Some numbers, because they are the whole story. England weighs 400 tons against a Fletcher-class destroyer's 2,050, 3 3-inch guns where a destroyer has 5.5. A crew of 213, where a fleet boat's opponent might expect 300. Across May and June 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy deployed about 25 submarines and lost about 17 of them. England's share of that is 6. Getting every one of those figures right took hours, because the version of this story that circulates online usually gives England credit for the whole line, and the whole line is not what happened. If that is the kind of history you want more of, hit like. 1 like. Nothing more. 01:20 hours, 24 May. George gets a radar contact. England has sonar at 1. The first hedgehog salvo at 0214 produces, and the noise of a submarine coming apart. But this time there is no great explosion underneath it, only silence, and then, after sunrise at 0702, a small patch of oil that spreads by the following day to cover several square miles of the Pacific. That is RO-116, and that is where the first half of this story ends. 4 boats in 6 days. What happens next is that the enemy notices. The 26th May 1944. RO-108 is the 5th. By now the routine on board England has the quality of a factory shift. The contact comes up, the projector crew loads. The ship makes her comes up, and the ship makes her run. 5 submarines in 8 days. Pendleton's men have stopped cheering on the fantail. 2 weeks earlier, not one of them had attacked an enemy in his life. What is happening on that ship in the last week of May 1944 is a crew becoming, in real time, the most effective anti-submarine unit of the Pacific War. Now shift 2,000 miles to a Japanese 6th Fleet staff room on the 27th May. The 6th Fleet ran Japan's submarines, and Japanese naval intelligence was not blind. It read American traffic too. On that day, its cryptanalysts intercepted and decoded U.S. communications indicating that several submarines had been sunk in the water north of the Admiralty Islands. And Naval History and Heritage Command's account records the Japanese noting that the American reports were growing steadily more jubilant. So the 6th Fleet did the correct thing. It sent a warning to the boats still on the line. And here the record turns genuinely strange, because the warning changed nothing at all. RO-105 had already sailed. She left Saipan on the 14th May under Lieutenant Junichi Inoue, and she was not carrying an ordinary patrol crew. Captain Ryonosuke Keita, commander of Submarine Division 51, was aboard. A division commander does not embark for a routine scouting station. He embarks when headquarters wants a senior officer's eyes on a problem. RO-105 was a veteran boat. She had dodged 2 torpedoes from an American submarine in 1943 and had pulled down Japanese aviators out of the sea more than once. She went to because the station had been assigned, and by to the assigned station because the 7th and May, there was nobody left on either side of her. 31 May. The hunter-killer group finds RO-105, and this time England is not the ship that attacks. Raby and George go in first, one after another, and neither can finish her. The boat is handled well, and the attacks keep failing. And then the group commander, watching 2 ships spend their runs, gives one of the least ceremonial orders in the history of the United States Navy. "Oh, hell. Go ahead, England." She went ahead. RO-105 was the 6th submarine in 12 days, and with her went Captain Kato, his division staff, and the last operational station on Admiral Toyoda's tripwire. The line was gone. When the American fleet moved on the Marianas 3 weeks later, the warning system built to see it coming was 6 boats of wreckage on the bottom between Truk and Manus. Samuel Eliot Morison, writing the Navy's own official history, called what England did unparalleled in anti-submarine warfare in any ocean. Admiral Ernest King, the Chief of Naval Operations, was a man famously immune to sentiment, and King did something about it that no other ship in the war provoked. But to understand what he did and why it mattered so much to one family in Colorado, we have to go back to a Sunday morning in 1941. Ships are named for people, and the reason this ship carried this name is the reason the story is worth telling at all. To get there, we're back 29 months to Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941, to a battleship on Ford Island and a 20-year-old communications officer who had been aboard her for 3 months. What he did that morning took perhaps 12 minutes. It saved 3 men. It cost him his life, and it is the reason there was a USS England for those 6 submarines to run into. His name was John Charles England. He was born in Harris, Missouri on the 11th of December 1920 and raised in Alhambra, California. He was president of his high school graduating class in 1938, acted in the senior play, joined the drama club, and by every account enjoyed an audience. He went on to Pasadena City College and graduated in 1940. On the 6th of September that year, he enlisted in the Naval Reserve as an apprentice seaman. He was commissioned an ensign on the 6th June 1941, trained at the Naval Radio School at Norton Heights, Connecticut, and reported aboard the battleship USS Oklahoma, hull number BB-37, on the 3rd of September 1941. He had 95 days left, 0755 hours. 9 torpedoes hit, the ship begins to roll. She capsizes in roughly 12 minutes, which is not enough time, and the order to abandon ship is passed while she is still going over. Ensign England gets topside. He is out. And then he thinks about the radio room below decks in a darkened ship that is turning upside down, and he goes back. He brings a man out. He goes back a second time and brings out another. He goes back a third time and brings out a third. Then he goes down for a fourth man, and nobody sees him again. 429 men died aboard Oklahoma that morning, the heaviest loss of any ship at Pearl Harbor except Arizona. England was one of 20 officers among them. He was 20 years old and he had been married. His daughter, Victoria Louise, was 1 month old and living in California, and he had never met her. In his last letter home, he apologized for not writing more often, said he would be thinking of them at Christmas, asked what they made of the baby, and wrote that the thing that got him was being the last one in the family to see her. The telegram reached his parents on the 16th December. 21 months later, on the 26th September 1943, a destroyer escort stood on the ways at the Bethlehem Yard in San Francisco. The Navy had a practice, and it kept to it. The ship was sponsored by the dead man's mother. Thelma England swung the bottle against the bow, and DE 635 went into the water carrying her son's name. His sister Lenny stood as maid of honor and kept the ribboned neck of that bottle until she died in 1995. 8 months after the launching, that ship was 200 miles north of Bougainville, listening to an echo come back. England received the Presidential Unit Citation and 10 battle stars. Pendleton received the Navy Promise. There would always be an England in the United States Navy. There is an honest footnote the loudest version of this story leaves out, and it has 3 parts. England did not do it alone. George and Raby made the first contacts on most of those boats and absorbed the failed attacks that set up her successes. The 12 days were built on Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, not on intuition. And Ensign England is frequently described online as a Medal of Honor recipient. He was not. The record shows a Purple Heart and 2 warships. The truth is more crowded than the legend, and it is still remarkable. For 75 years there was no grave to visit. His remains were recovered from Oklahoma during salvage, could not be identified, and were buried as an unknown at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, the Punch Bowl, with his name cut into the courts of the missing. Then forensic methods caught up. On 6 May 2016, the Defense WWII accounting agency identified him, and on the 13th of August 2016, Ensign John Charles England was buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Colorado Springs, next to the parents who had outlived him by 36 years. A rosette now marks his name at the Punch Bowl. His granddaughter chose the plot. He went back into a capsizing battleship 4 times, for men he could hear but could not see. Everything else, the 6 submarines, the record, the Admiral 40 ship, happened because of the 4th trip. USS England was scrapped in 1946, served from 1963 to 1994. There has been no England since, and sailors still write about it. If your family had someone in the Pacific, a tin can, an escort carrier, a shipyard in Oakland, put them in the comments, not just a rate and a hull number. Tell us one thing about them. A habit, a saying, something they brought home. Ships get scrapped and names come off the list. What lasts is what somebody remembers to write down. Subscribe, and we will keep writing them down.